What's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here then welcome to our little corner of the internet. Today we're going to be watching a video titled "Why Can't the US Intercept Iranian Drones as Easily as Ukraine Can?" Which, odd title, but let's see what this video is about.
If there is one aspect of the Iran war that is generating the largest public misunderstanding, it is how the United States and its partners in the Middle East have handled the drone situation. Anyone paying even an ounce of attention to the war in Ukraine is aware of the threat that long-range drones present. Just about every day, Ukraine faces a barrage of dozens to hundreds of them. Most get shot down, but some reach their targets and inflict serious damage. Moreover, these Russian drones are more precisely Iran-licensed drones produced in Russia. It therefore does not take a...
What are these drones though? Like, are they like, kind of like missiles? Or what is the difference, since you can also target with other weapons? Can you fly it like a drone, or...
A brilliant mind to realize that maybe, just maybe, a war in Iran would result in Iran's own drones paying a visit to hostile countries. So when the drones started to strike places like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, both targeting US bases and other partner countries' assets, the outrage began. How can Ukraine, a country with a pre-invasion GDP of only $200 billion, do such a good job shooting down Russian drones at tens of thousands of dollars per interceptor, while the richer United States and its wealthy partners let so many drones through and occasionally spend millions per interceptor?
Interesting.
The confusion reached its peak after Iran, or one of its proxies, struck a British airbase in Cyprus, leading Prime Minister Keir Starmer to say that he was going to reach out to Ukraine to get technical help on interceptors, followed by Zelensky declaring that he would be more than happy to help. It is good politics when the fate of your country continues to depend on arms shipments from coalition partners. However, the perception of the whole saga that I just presented is predicated on two fundamental misunderstandings, one about existing cooperation with Ukraine, and another about the overall US strategy in Iran. A strategy that matches NATO's current plans for how to fight Russia. Consequently, understanding this is critical if you want to have a grasp of how the next major war may play out. Let me start with the part about existing cooperation, because that is easier to parse. If you have stuck with this channel through thick and thin...
I love that. Let's start with this because it's easier to understand. Yes, please. There's a lot of videos that I've seen recently that are so confusing.
Because that is easier to parse. If you have stuck with this channel through thick and thin, you might recall how technology and war strategy is a two-way street between NATO and Ukraine. Once upon a time, it very much was NATO lecturing Ukraine about good military doctrine. But by the end of the first year of the war or so, modern tactics had changed enough that Ukraine was delivering lessons to NATO. What I have found surprising about the recent exchange, especially from Starmer's parsing of things, is that it makes it sound like Western countries have literally no idea how Ukraine intercepts Shahed drones. That is just factually inaccurate. Remember, there is an entire institute in Poland called the Joint Analysis, Training and Education Center, or JATEC for short, whose entire purpose is to ensure that both sides are aware of what each is doing and how they are doing it. Moreover, although Ukraine certainly produces a ton of one-way drones, Kyiv imports plenty of them from partner countries too. That goes from your standard quadcopters used on the front lines, at least when I am not crashing them, to, yes, indeed, interceptors for Shaheds.
So they are kind of like, okay, so you can fly them. That's the difference. And how does the drone interceptor work then?
You might even recall that I attended one of NATO's technology conferences last fall on the outskirts of Istanbul, which showcased some of the interceptors designed in allied countries and then tested on the battlefield in Ukraine. They were literally discussing the exact strategy that Starmer's comments made it seem like was a complete mystery. And if you wanted to get deep into the logistics of how Ukraine shoots down Shaheds, again, including sometimes with interceptors imported from other European countries, that is public knowledge too. I have made a video on the entire process, from detection to final interception.
Is this Ukraine's president, by the way? He looks like he wears very, very chill clothing.
Made a video on the entire process, from detection to final interception. As a result,
seems like he has humanized himself quite well. Kind of like the style.
I am a little confused about what this entire dialogue is about, or at least the suggestion that this conversation is just now starting. Kyiv certainly is not sending someone to the United States for the first time to instruct the Pentagon how to beat Shaheds. They have already had that conversation in Poland, and I am sure plenty of Ukrainians have already traveled across the Atlantic for a more targeted conversation. Same thing about instructing British teams. They have already had that conversation in Poland too. Maybe some of the Arab countries might prefer direct instruction from Ukraine, but the time for direct instruction was years ago. By the time that Arab countries' militaries would have a good grasp of how to use Ukraine's interception techniques, the pressing need for them will likely have passed. So the best that I can make sense of this is that Ukraine may be directly sending teams to these countries, with both the equipment and the personnel to provide some air defense. And Ukraine will certainly be receiving something in return, like the heavier interceptors, to compensate for the loss. Ukraine has been lobbying for those since forever at this point. This would also square the timing of the transfer. Conducting such a transfer before the Iran war started was not feasible, because those
So, what they're saying is Ukraine is giving the information on how they're doing it, and they're getting something in return, which I didn't quite understand. They already had the information, but what?
Iranian teams were otherwise busy. There is still a war going on over there after all. Now that the Iran war has started, though, Zelensky's hand has officially been dealt, and it turns out that he still does have cards to play. And so he is playing them. Throwback to that conversation exactly a year before the Iran war started that suggested that he had no cards. Nonetheless, as I just indicated, there is a lingering question of whether the interception teams will arrive in time to have a meaningful impact on the war. Because the other perplexing thing about this whole narrative is a fundamental misunderstanding of the US counter-drone strategy. Ukraine shoots down Russian drones once they have crossed the border because there is no viable alternative for Kyiv. Sure, Ukraine's military has its own set of long-range attack drones, and although refineries receive the most attention both in terms of news stories and Ukraine's actual targeting, some of those drones try to hit the factories where Russia produces its Shaheds. However, Ukraine's ability to do that is limited, and for all of the modern love of one-way attack drones, they do not quite hit with enough oomph to reliably destroy a well-protected drone factory.
They don't hit with enough oomph. Oomph. The Ukraine and Russia war also, I haven't really watched a lot on it, but it's been going on for so long.
Hence the shield approach that Ukraine has adopted. In contrast, US doctrine here is that the best defense is a good offense. Rather than shoot down individual drones and missiles, the United States wants to destroy their warehouses, production facilities, and launch platforms. The advantage here is obvious. Rather than need to cast a huge defensive net, you simply nip the problem in the bud. The problem is that you have to be really good at projecting power. I
feel like I look like I'm angry in these videos because I'm sitting like this, but it's really, really freaking cold here. And I don't have my, my air remote close to me. So after this video, I'm gonna go get it. Fendi, and nobody asked about your opinion, okay? Girl, be quiet. Thank you. She's becoming very annoying, guys. Have you seen she started to like bark in every video? Anyways.
Power to accomplish that goal. Well, the United States is really good at projecting power, and so that is why it is taking the risk. In the short run, the plan is to use high-quality interception systems to take down the first wave of attacks. That means Patriots and THAADs, mostly for ballistic missiles, but occasionally for a high-risk Shahed. For the bulk of the Shaheds, the vector that the Ukrainian teams ostensibly will be helping with, fighter jets patrol the skies to shoot them out of the air. I have seen criticism that using those systems is unsustainable, because each Iranian launch might cost tens of thousands of dollars, while each interception might cost hundreds of thousands for air-to-air interceptions, or millions for surface-to-air interceptions.
Wow.
Ukrainian interceptors, priced per unit at thousands of dollars, provide better value. 3 points in response.
Totally.
1. Ukraine's system
But how can it be so different?
has significant startup costs that you must pay before you can take advantage of the attractive per-unit price. Hold that thought for a minute. 2. When you have a collection of rich countries doing the intercepting and a very poor country doing the launching, then you can, in fact, spend your way out of the problem. There is still a good question of whether it is the best economic decision to do so, but that is a question of optimization, not capability. And 3, the pristine interception system is intentionally unsustainable. It is a stopgap measure until the United States destroys Iranian systems at their source. And that is for the best, because aside from the cost differential, the United States only has so many of these pristine interception systems in its inventories. That applies especially to Patriots, but you would also prefer if your fighters were doing something else than hitting Shaheds. How is that going so far? Well, by the 5th day of the war, Iran's missile and drone launches had dropped by about 90%.
Am I reading the room wrong? Why does he sound kind of passive-aggressive?
By the 5th day of the war, Iran's missile and drone launches had dropped by about 90% from their highs on the first 2 days of the war. So, at least thus far, the drone and missile defense strategy is going according to plan. And as I have repeatedly alluded to, it makes you wonder whether any transfers from Ukraine will arrive at a point where they can have a tangible effect. Now, no one should get excited that this is mission accomplished in Iran yet, but the situation is meeting expectations.
Good.
Oh, and a quick historical footnote in case things turn south later. Bush's infamous mission accomplished speech took place on the USS Abraham Lincoln, which is now sitting off the coast of Iran. If there was a hiccup anywhere, it was in failing to anticipate how Iran would respond to a US-Israeli air campaign. It appears that the planners believed that Iran would choose to limit its strikes to US or Israeli assets, so as to not draw anyone else into the conflict.
But they didn't.
Instead, Iran
They went full on with everybody.
has responded by taking munitions and yeeting them at basically everyone.
Which was so confusing to me. Like, they got attacked by someone. Why would you, like, just be like, oh, well, I'm gonna do this and that and that and that. You know? It felt like they panicked and started just throwing bombs at everyone.
Responded by taking munitions and yeeting them at basically everyone. In turn, it seems that some of those partner countries were not fully prepared to defend against the waves that hit them. The failure there is the type of thing that will need to be addressed in a post-war retrospective, and it will raise questions about why those countries have not invested in replicating Ukraine's defensive shield, again because Iran was the original producer of the Shahed. For now, though, the solution is basic. Just be on guard for however long the war lasts. Meanwhile, NATO allies are paying close attention to what is happening here, aside from the disputes on the direct or indirect roles that each ally will play. Looking at the bigger conflict picture, there are 2 competing theories on why the war in Ukraine looks the way that it does. One is that it is a product of the military technology of our era. Drones are cheap and easy to produce, and they can flood the skies on a whim. Flying pristine fighters to destroy them proactively is too much of a risk, so the best alternative is to answer your opponent's massive drones with your own massive drones. So if the West wants to succeed in future wars, it better figure out a way to start mass-producing drones now. The second theory is that the war in Ukraine is a product of Ukraine's military limitations and Russia's political limitations. If Ukraine were better armed and trained on the best of systems, it could in fact destroy Russian factories and not have to deal with any of this. Russia, meanwhile, cannot mobilize more forces without angry mobs descending on the Kremlin, and so we get this arrangement of slow territorial exchanges. That includes an especially slow February, which by some measures actually saw Russia lose ground. It is likely a one-time break as a consequence of Starlink going dark for Russia, but it was a rare piece of good news for Ukraine that has gotten lost in the Iran shuffle. Anyway, Iran has become a laboratory.
What was Elon Musk doing at the White House? What is going on here? Are they still friends? Didn't they, they were friends and then something happened, right? I don't know.
To test those competing hypotheses. Thus far, with the United States quickly establishing control of the skies, it seems that the evidence is pointing to the lack of Ukrainian ability to project power as the answer, with 3 significant caveats. 1, again, it is still early. 2, Iran is not as well equipped as Russia. And 3, Russia has much, much longer distances that you must cross than Iran does. NATO doctrine remains to take control of the skies, systematically break every Russian supply line, and then figuratively, and literally, starve out any remaining Russian soldiers. Russian drone operators cannot function for long if they cannot eat. The Allies are hedging, of course, hence the information transfer at Jatek and the Allies' various investments in drones. One such investment is worth going into further depth on because it speaks to a reason why the Arab countries may have not yet developed a Ukraine-like drone defense. Just look at the regional map for a second. This is a network problem. A Shahed might fly over many different countries before striking its intended target. And because this is a network problem, it requires network solutions. That is how Ukraine does it, and it is...
What is going on with his hand?
...different for a second. This is a network problem. A Shahed might fly...
Is this something that, is common knowledge? What is going on with his hand? Why does it look like it's made out of plastic?
...fly over many...
Look at the way it moves.
...different countries before striking its intended target. And because this is a network problem, it requires network solution.
He probably has some known issue in his hand. I just didn't know until now. Looks like it's made out of plastic. Can someone tell me what's going on there?
...intended target. And because this is a network problem, it requires network solutions. That is how Ukraine does it, and it is relatively easy for Ukraine to do because Ukraine is but one country. It is relatively easy to have each of Ukraine's individual regions talk to one another. Thus, if a Shahed must fly over multiple Ukrainian regions before striking its intended target, Ukraine's network can handle it. If Iran's Shaheds must fly over multiple countries before striking its intended target, a regional network could, in theory, handle it. In practice, though, these countries do not exactly have a rich history of cooperation. As a point of comparison, solving the network problem should be a bit easier for the countries of Europe. And indeed, NATO is working on a blueprint for its own version of a shield under a program called LCIX. We have discussed this a few times before as one of the higher visibility projects at NATO's Allied Command Transformation Headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia. Oh, and to address you locals, I am not going to pronounce Norfolk as you do. This is a family show about war, after all. Aside from that, automated target prioritization was one of the categories at the Allied Command Transformation Hackathon in Reykjavik that I attended last week. The before times, when I only had to focus on but a single war. One of the less obvious problems here is that when you are staring down so much mass coming all at the same time, it helps if you have some automation to sort out priorities. Perhaps not surprisingly, it was the Ukrainian team that won this part of the competition. On the opposite end of the workflow, the real trick here is to get 32 systems to interoperate without issue. That is why NATO spends so much time conducting exercises. It is not about practice making perfect. It is about practice making working together feasible at all. And that raises another central problem in the Middle East. I can tell you what interoperability does not look like, Interoperability does not look like Kuwait shooting down 3 US F-15s.
What is interoperability?
Thus, a true solution to the problem is both difficult and expensive. A country-by-country solution is easier, but still expensive to initialize. So you can see why perhaps some prefer to stick to the expensive solution, at least for the time being. However, depending on what Iran looks like at the end of the war, they may want to start working on layered defense. And depending on how the next month or two plays out, they may regret not having started sooner. If you want to learn more about how Ukraine shoots down Russian drones and glide bombs, check out my full breakdown here. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Take care.
Thank you. You take care too. And you guys take care too. That was an interesting video, once again. A lot of information I've never heard of before. I really enjoyed that these were actual videos of the actual people and not like AI made photos that we've been watching for a while, because it's cool to see kind of real footage for a change. But either way, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this video. I really hope you liked it. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what's going on with this guy's hand. I think he has passed. Is this the man who passed? I think so. And yeah. Once again, thank you. Please like, subscribe. We're getting closer to 100K. I'm so excited. I already have balloons to take a 100K photo when we hit 100K. I've had them for months, but I'm so excited. Thank you guys. I love you. And I'll see you guys in the next video.